Hi guys, Cody here with Edge Pro, coming at you with a brand new subject we've never talked about here before, and that subject would be the drill stop collar. First, I'm going to tell you exactly what it does, then I'm going to weigh in with a quick observation / opinion that I think is really important for you to hear if you're just getting started in the knife sharpening game. Then last, I'm going to show you how to use the collar on the Apex and the professional model, because it is a slightly different process depending on which machine you're using. So let's get started. So for those who haven't come across this chapter in the knife sharpening world, I'll give you a little background. When you're using a guided sharpening system and you switch from one stone to the next, you will get a slight amount of angle change as the stones vary in thickness. The more your stones vary in thickness, the more your sharpening angle is going to change. Let me show you what that looks like real quick so we're all on the same page. I have 5 stones here. Every one of them is a different thickness. First, we're going to zero our angle gauge on the table. Next, I'm going to move the stone so it's off center in the stone arm, and that's going to give us a surface to rest the angle gauge. For this demonstration, I'm going to set the angle at an even 24 degrees. Then, without moving the angle setting, I'm going to load these 5 different stones in so you can see what happens to the sharpening angle. So before we get to the instructional side, allow me to jump in for a moment and just share an observation I've made over my years in customer service. And that observation would be that most people that I've spoken to that do not have a digital angle gauge never even notice the angle change. And the only reason I bring this up is that sharpening is a pretty simple process, and if you're not a sharpening geek and you don't have a bunch of different stones that vary in thickness, then you might be overcomplicating things by going down this road. But if you've been using your Edge Pro for a while and you're looking to squeeze just a little more consistency out of your knife sharpener, this could be something you'd like to try. At the very least, it could be a cheap source of entertainment to test out and see if you can notice the difference. First, I want to remind you that angle gauges are only accurate within like 1 or 2/10 of a degree, so just allow me a little bit of wiggle room as we go through this. To begin, let's get this angle set at an even 21 degrees with one of the stones for a baseline setting. Next, you're going to remove the stone, place it underneath the pivot, and raise the collar so it's pinching the stone between the collar and the pivot. For the sake of this conversation, I'm going to call this the initial collar setting. And we need to talk about the initial collar setting for a second, because there are 3 different theories on the right way to get your initial collar setting. So the first theory is to get your initial collar setting with the stone that you're going to begin with before you start to sharpen. The second theory is to make your initial collar setting also with your first stone, but after you've developed a burr. So you would develop a burr first, then set the collar to that stone you just used. Then we have theory number 3, and that would be to make your initial collar setting with the stone you intend to finish with. As far as I see it, I think all of these paths lead you to the same destination. But let's continue with the lesson, and after you've watched this to the very end, let me know in the comments which theory has your vote. Now that you have your initial collar setting, that collar is going to stay in the same place for the rest of the sharpening session. So the collar only moves once and gets locked in. After that, every time you change stones, you pinch the next stone between the collar and the pivot by moving the pivot. And that adjustment you make compensates for the varying stone thicknesses, and it keeps the angle more consistent. And you would repeat this process every time you move on to the next sharpening stone. So with the apex, when you adjust the sharpening angle, the vertical rod is stationary and the pivot moves up and down the rod. On the professional model, the pivot and the rod move up and down together. It's ultimately the same process, but instead of pinching the stone between the collar and the pivot, you pinch the stone between the collar and the back of the machine. Other than that, it's the same concept. You set the collar once at the beginning and get that initial collar setting we were talking about. Then you move the vertical shaft up or down to get your pinch before you begin with each following stone. So there you have it. That's the drill stop color trick in a nutshell. It's definitely worth mentioning that using this method is only as accurate as your stones are flat. So make sure you're checking your stones for flatness before you go down this path. And if you need to level your stones, or you want to get your hands on one of these drill stop collars or one of these angle gauges, I got links to everything you could possibly need in the description.